Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast, where we empower you with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom. I'm Josh Metal, and I'm here today with my mom, Cynthia Hale, longtime business partner, lifetime mentor, and someone that I think you're going to find is very special. And we're here today to talk about a unique happening and really a celebration for us. This year marks the 20th anniversary that my mom and I have owned an apartment building. And what we're going to do is like a case study. We're going to go back and we're going to talk about the 20-year journey with just one piece of property. And what's interesting at the end of that 20-year road is that we've learned so much. And the dynamics of the property have changed so much. And a lot of it I would have never have guessed. I mean, if you would have asked me 20 years ago, what's this going to look like in 20 years? I never would have described it where we are now. Mom, would you? I mean, are you as surprised as I am?
Not as surprised as you are, because I watched my mom and dad do it. But back when we started this, you were looking for a wife. I mean, you had your mind elsewhere.
This is true. This is very true. You only get this kind of information when mom's on the podcast, by the way, everybody. Oh, well, Mom, I should finish your introduction because I think it's important that people know your background. So, Mom was a serial entrepreneur when I grew up, and I saw her run and operate, and I worked in many of her businesses, or at least a couple. And that's really where my entrepreneurial spirit came from. And then Mom and I moved from Southern California to Salt Lake City, Utah, to work on a real estate apartment building that my grandparents had foreclosed upon. Supposed to be a 6-month project, wasn't it, Mom?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it was a 6-month. I remember we were driving past Vegas on the way to Utah and talked about 6 months. And I thought, okay, we'll be back in 6 months. And then 5 years later, the project ended and we never moved back. And that worked out okay. But it was just, interesting. And so I grew up weeding and landscaping alongside my grandpa and working 40, 50-hour weeks at 11 years old. My mom was working
as borrowed too much money.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. We'll talk about leverage later, Mom. And my mom was working, she got thrown into an apartment manager job. She had 90 units that she was managing. And then eventually, after that project was done, my mom went back to law school, got her law degree. She was Phi Kappa Phi, which means she was, very top of her class. And she was the first female lawyer to go into solo practice, which means that she didn't go work for a big firm. I think she would confirm she's unemployable.
True, in many ways.
She wanted to be the boss from day one. She created UtahLandlady.com, which was actually the genesis and idea for a website that I started, which was UtahPhysicianHomeLoans.com. And she created her own website, did her own HTML coding, and created the first female solo law practice in Utah's history. And
I put up the third lawyer website in the country.
Yes.
I coded it all myself.
That's right. And boy, we could really go down a rabbit hole there, but obviously Mom has been an entrepreneurial, an investor, and just kind of a brave soul mentor to me. Because I've never seen anything that Mom didn't look at and want to do, and she didn't just dive head first and figure out how to do it. So she's that kind of lady, and she's been a great partner and a great mom. So thanks, Mom. I love you.
Love you back.
We got to kick off with that. All right, so I want to tee this up, and then I want to just be quiet for a minute and let you tell the story. And as you tell the story of Wall Street, 475 North Wall Street, I'll pull out some of the threads and maybe we'll get into some of the numbers, but let's just start back at the beginning. And how did we, how did the buy side of this property go? What kind of landmines did we run into? There were some surprises. like, let's just kind of tell the opening story, the first quarter, if you will, of our history with this property in the first 5 years of owning it.
Okay, I'll fast mouth it. We learned just about every mistake in the world on this property.
Yeah.
I don't think you can start no matter how much you learn. And honestly, I have a law degree and years of real estate practice, and we still stepped on tons of landmines. So if you wait to learn everything in the world before you start, it won't happen. And that was my attitude. So I found this eightplex. I closed Josh to be my partner because he was the one with the provable income. And we got, we were poor. Josh had a full daytime job. I was new in practice as a lawyer, daytime job. We were doing this all ourselves. We had done two things prior. We had bought a condo on the courthouse steps and the Ark in North Salt Lake. We called it the Ark, 4,000 square foot of, we learned how to renovate on that one because we didn't have a budget. So we did it ourselves, 4,000 square feet of painting and everything. So by the time, it's amazing to me that we kept going.
Yeah.
So now we're going for an eightplex. I mean,
well, and if I could just pause for a second, the first two investments were not successes. The condo
was over time.
Say again.
The condo was over time.
Yes, absolutely. But at the moment, the condo was probably 20 grand underwater, meaning we had invested or borrowed 20 grand more than what it was worth because there were some short sales in the condo complex. And the Ark, the 4,000 square foot home in North Salt Lake, we worked our butts off. I mean, we're talking 10 o'clock at night, rolling the paint across the roof, Saturdays, Sundays, open houses. And the whole summer. And we paid back our partners that provided some of the capital. We got our investment back. And what did we make, like $2,000?
Oh, we figured we probably made 29 cents an hour.
We should have been delivering papers.
That was the joke. But the amazing thing is we kept going.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me, after the first two disasters, we kept going. So this was our third one. So I'll keep talking until you cut me off. Okay, so we made the offer. The offer got accepted. What did we pay, Bud? $315,000 for this eightplex?
Yeah, my recollection is $315,000.
And that was in 2001.
Correct.
So that was your first year as a loan broker, I think. So you were starting a new business. I was new in business. So the day before the close, Josh gets called in. He tells the story better than I will. And the loan broker says, hey, the good news is you get the loan. The bad news is you've got to come in with $20,000 more, and we're going to bump your interest rate up a point or two. And Josh told him to take a hike. And then he called me and said, I told him to take a hike. And I went, no, you can't tell him to take a hike. I really want this. And I wasn't going to let it go. And so the first time in my life, my parents had sold the 90 units and they had some money sitting there that my mom was trying to do some dumb stuff with. So I begged my mom for a loan, and it was so depressing and demoralizing, but I begged for the loan. She gave us the loan, first position. It was the First National Bank of Hale, I called it. And that's my last name. And so they gave us the loan at 8.5% interest. And for the first 5 years, Josh and I paid 8.5% interest. We 100% financed the property. Don't follow this example. We're not telling you how to do it right. We're just telling you how we did it. We still made it go right. Then I think, just skipping over all the horror stories, I think about 5 years later, Josh got us down to a 5%. Is that right, Bud? I think you got us down to a 5% loan. For the first time ever, we were positive cash flow because Josh got me to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I was completely unable to have negative cash flow anymore. It was just negative because we were improving it. Josh went over the figures with me because we were improving the apartments as they turned over, but it was negative. And so Josh refinanced us, got up to 5% interest. And then a few years later, he refinanced us at 3.75 or something. And it was serious cash flow. So we bought it at 315. What do you think it's worth now? But minimum 2 million.
Yeah, I would estimate between 2 and 2.5 million.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter because we're not selling, but it's nice to rejoice that we have equity. And we paid it off this year. So we have completely positive cash flow. Our first rent started, can I go to this first or do you want more horror stories?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
We can backfill horror stories.
Okay. So the first rents were from 280 to, I think our highest one was 315 per unit. These are all 2-bedroom up on Capitol Hill, which is like pimp property now. And now I just rented the last one a couple of weeks ago for 1,450 plus water, sewer, and garbage, so 1,480, 1,490.
Yeah.
So from 300 average to 1,490 in that time period, and it's all positive cash flow, pretty much, other than just renovations as we go along, because the mortgage is paid off after 20 years.
Yeah,
and it's prime location.
Yeah. Well, if I'm pulling the golden threads out, and I want to get back to that, that rental increase, because that's the thing that I don't hear people talk about. I don't hear them talk about, what is that rental income going to look like in 20 years? Because once you see that, and once we have felt it as investors, you're like, man, I'm not investing in anything else again as long as I live. I don't have to touch the principal, and rents keep going up like crazy. So I want to get back to that, but there's a couple of golden threads of the story you laid out that I want to pull out.
Okay.
What are you laughing at me now for?
Because of the horror stories. So we had the question of why did we keep buying real estate? And now you're going to understand the question of why did we not sell? Because we stepped on every landmine. So the first day on our new property, we bought it with 1 vacancy. Should I tell that story?
Oh, sure.
Okay. This is our first horror story. I arrived on the property. I got there before Josh. He was late. And we were going to clean, and Josh was going to paint. And we were going to put this thing on the market. So I got there, and the little gangbanger, when you buy property, you inherit the last landlord's horrors. A lot of times people sell property because they hate their tenants and they can't confront handling it.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing we learned. So the little gangbanger right next door to the apartment we were working on walked over with a nasty look on his face and all puffed up. So he told me what he wanted to do to me and how he wanted to do it. My heart was beating out of my chest. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I took a walk down the street, called Josh, told him what just happened. Josh says, I'm on the freeway. I'll be right there. And then I thought, oh, great. My son's going to come defend my honor. My son is 6'3". The gangbanger's 5'3". This isn't going to work out well. My son's going to jail. So I called the cops and said, would you come talk to this guy? Because my son is speeding on the freeway to come defend my honor after being told what this guy's going to do to me. And so the cops were out in the parking lot for at least an hour and a half. It was a long, long time trying to settle this guy down. And meanwhile, Josh was settled. He settled himself down pretty well. I said, Josh, you're not going to win on this one because you're the big guy. No matter what happens, you're going to jail.
I think I went to work. I got bored of the cops talking to him and just started working, didn't I? I hope.
We got the job done.
Yeah.
But that was our first day on the property. And by the way, we have repeats of that. I have a horror story. First day on the property on several other properties. The day you walk on, they're gonna start taking out on you what they wanted to do to the last landlord. So don't think it's unique. Okay, so that's one horror story. Should I just give a few more real quick?
Sure. I'll take some notes. There's a few things that I want to pull out of here, but keep rolling.
Okay, I'll just give a few horror stories and you can talk about the real stuff. Because when you guys go through this, don't think it's unique. We went through it. Okay, so I had another apartment where I was going to get a real good rent. I found a real good couple. They qualified. And right at the very end as we're negotiating, they wanted me to pull the carpet and refinish the hardwood floors. I was like, what? So, okay, we'll do it. I wanted the tenants and I wanted to get it rented. So we pulled the carpet and there were thousands of nails, staples all over the floor, in the hardwood floor. And years later, I learned that there's such a thing as scrapers and that the refinishers that were coming the next day would have scraped the nails off, but I didn't know that. I was a brand new landlord. So I got on my hands and knees all night long. I think I left like 1:30 in the morning, maybe later, picking with a knife and a screwdriver, picking thousands of staples out of the floor. And I was in court at 8 o'clock the next morning. I had court cases on these things. So, and I had to take ibuprofen because I could hardly move. I was bent over all night long. I could barely move. And I won the case. Okay. So that's the second one. So that's the second horror story because I didn't know there was such a thing as a scraper. And then there was another one, another night, and Josh and I had no budget. We were financing all the renovations. So I was trying to keep the cost down. So I thought I was saving money by getting all those staples out. And then on another apartment right next door, one day
we weren't financing the renovations. That was our part of the investment. We financed the purchase price, but we were paying cash, our investment for the renovations, weren't we?
Well, I meant we're financing out of our own paychecks.
There we go.
We're paying people to live there, basically. So, okay, so on the next one, I'm about 11 o'clock at night, I re-cemented a floor where the toilet was kind of caving in. Don't do this, guys. I had to rent this apartment the next day. So there's this black cement you can get from Home Depot, and I cemented the floor, waited for that. And then I laid the tile, and Josh calls me about 11 o'clock and says, "What the hell are you doing?" So I just swore, sorry, can you believe that? "What are you doing?"
You're good. You have
Okay.
amnesty here, Mom.
Okay, good. I said, "Well, I'm tiling the floor in number 5. He goes, "Stop that right now. Go home, get somebody to do it." I said, "I got bids. The best bid was $350. Do you have $350? He goes, "No, I don't have $350. I said, "Well, I don't have $350. So I'm going to tile the floor." I tiled the floor. I was in court the next morning at 8 o'clock. By the way, my handyman told me about 6 years later that I did a really good job and he was proud of me. It lasted for like 10 years. I did a good job. And then, okay, one more horror story and I'll stop. So when Josh quit helping me, the day he quit helping on renovations, because Josh would come help me on all the painting, hanging blinds and everything, the day he quit. So after work, we'd go take care of the service requests. So after work, Josh and I went up to fix a leaking toilet. So Josh is laying underneath the toilet. Well, it's like a tank to toilet kit he was installing. So he's laying in the cork under the toilet, trying to figure out how to make it work. I'm holding the tank, and it leaked on him. It ruined his first brand new silk shirt. He bought his first $90 silk shirt, and he says, "I could have paid a plumber. I wasted a $90 silk shirt. I'm never going to do that again. I'm going to hire it out." And he did. Boy, that was it. He ruined the silk shirt. So, and then I had to hire people out because Josh wasn't coming to save me anymore. Okay, so those were lessons we learned right off at the beginning. Oh, one more, and then I'm done. Okay, so the first 2 years, we couldn't afford a sprinkler system. My dad was a landscaper. Landscaping is expensive. We couldn't afford a sprinkler system to water the entry and the lower fourplex. It's 2 fourplexes on a hill, on Capitol Hill, but it was zoned as an 8plex. So I would go after work at night, 3 nights a week, maybe 4, in my expensive attorney go to court clothes, and I would take my hose out of the back of my Jeep and I would hand water that property 3 or 4 times a week for 2 years until Josh and I could get together $3,000 for the sprinkler system. That's how poor we were. I mean, we were making it, we were just barely scraping by to make it work. That was our first multi-unit investment. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Yeah, and that in the Wikipedia, that slang term, "fake it till you make it," that was our pictures were in there. That was us. We were faking it until we made it.
Yeah.
Well, obviously we've defined good cop, bad cop here. Mom's job is to talk you out of investing in real estate. My job is to work really hard to up her stories and talk you into real estate. No, I'm just kidding. But
I never gave up.
What's that?
I never gave up.
No. And I think that's the first lesson, or the first golden thread that I wanted to pull out of this, is that, you're going to encounter obstacles. And to Mom's earlier comment, you can read 1 million books, you can watch 1 million YouTube videos, and the reality is you're not going to be able to learn at the speed that you need to learn without actually getting into a deal and finding those decisions that need to be made. So first thing was, we did everything wrong. We learned on the fly. Our first 3 properties, we made more mistakes than you can possibly imagine, and they still all worked out for us over time. So the first lesson that I learned in real estate is that, or one of the big lessons that sticks with me, is that time cures all. All of these mistakes where we, on a previous property overpaid, and then there was foreclosures and the value was low, all of these mistakes with, what we did on maintenance, and I'm sure there's a lot of things we could have done more economical. All of those mistakes are cured over time, because over time, rents go up, appreciation goes up, your debt goes down. There's what's called inflation-induced debt destruction. What's that? Well, what happens is over time is that you make more money, and the value of money, if you will, goes down with inflation. Earnings go up, but the cost of your credit, the mortgage, stays the same. Or in the case that Mom talked about, we refinanced many times to lower interest rates. So if you look at, the amount of income that we're creating in our businesses and across all of our companies 20 years later, the amount of mortgage we had on that property was now so low, we were able to just, pay it down and pay it off. But at the time, that mortgage of $315,000 was huge. I mean, it was massive. And so over 20 years, you have the benefit of inflation-induced debt destruction. I did another podcast on that with Jason Hartman. So if anybody wants to check that out, I'd encourage you to check out the Jason Hartman interview. The other thing, Mom, that I want to pull out of this is, this concept around OPM, other people's money. And when it got down to it, we had somebody renegotiate the financing terms on us. And we didn't say, screw it. We leveraged OPM, other people's money. And we brought them in as a partner. We paid them we gave them a first mortgage on the property. We paid them an 8.5% return, which, remember, that was kind of like going rate 20 years ago. So that wasn't like an obscene rate at that time. And we made it go right. We used all of our own capital for improvements. We slowly increased the rents. We got blessed by falling interest rates, and we just earned our way into cash flow over that first 5 years. Anything else you want to?
My pitch to my mom was, look, you need to invest your money. They just sold a complex. Josh and I will manage it for free. We'll do the management and the upgrades for free. And if we completely screw up, it's a great piece of property for the estate. And so that was my pitch, and they bought it.
Well, and not for free, right? I mean, we're doing all the work, and we're paying them 8.5%. And if it doesn't work out,
owners, even if they had to foreclose on us or make us give it up, they had been getting interest all that time. They got it free managed, and they'd take over a property that was in pretty good shape because we've been running it. So, I mean, even if we totally screwed up, they'd be in a good position. That was my pitch.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. I think there's more to that. If you're gonna leverage OPM, other people's money, you better be passionate about it. You better have a good pitch. You better have thought it through. What's in it for the other person that you're asking to leverage their money? How are they secured? What's their upside? What's their worst case scenario? And how would you get yourself through it?
Yeah. Oh, we lost your sound.
Yes, I'm just muting so you didn't hear background noise. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
Mom, one other lesson here, unless you have anything else to say on OPM, is there anything else that you wanted to share there?
I can't think of anything.
Okay. Well, the other thing that just came up for me is that, we've now used OPM and other partners' credit, other partners' ability to do renovations and construction. I mean, we've leveraged other people's money, other people's credit, other people's ability to do renovations. We've leveraged a lot of partners over the last 20 years that have enabled us to get to where we are. So if the point of this is, if you're feeling like, I don't have money, I don't have knowledge, I don't have credit, I don't have those things, that isn't a stop. That doesn't mean you can't invest in real estate. That just means you need to find a partner that you trust, that you think has integrity, that can bring that part of the equation together so you can keep on your journey.
Yep.
The other thing, Mom, that I think is important to pull out of what you were talking about is this concept around every time we buy a property, we know that there's going to be things we haven't accounted for, tenant issues that we're going to have to turn over, and it's going to take a couple of years. We call it getting a property under control. And that's even if you buy a good property and you do good due diligence and it's in a good neighborhood. I mean, we're not buying ghettos, we're buying good properties. There's still surprises. And what I would say is that, getting a property under control, whatever that is, the first couple of years to get that under control, depending on how big the property is and what the turnover rate is, that's like 90% of the energy. It's like getting a rocket into outer space. You're going to use 90% of your fuel to get the property under control. And you should just anticipate that. Like, some crap's going to happen. I'm not going to expect it. I'm going to have to spend some money. I'm going to have to evict somebody. That's just par for the course. And that's getting the rocket out of the atmosphere and out of the gravitational pull. You're going to spend 90% of your gas there. But then it gets into outer space and it just kind of runs because, now we have 8 tenants that we've handpicked and approved to live there. We've improved each of those units and now one turns over. Big whoop. You know what I mean? I mean, the property's, is pretty much rolling at that point. Anything you'd add to that, Mom, in your experience?
Are you going to talk about the amount of money?
Amount of money for what?
That we make now compared to what we made when we bought the property?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of go through those 3 lessons that I pulled out of your.
Yes. Okay, I get where you're going now. Then let me just give one more example that was not on this property, but I'll make it quick. On another, we bought an 18-plex down the road. And the first day we were on that property, Josh and I used to put notices out and say, hey, we're your new owners, blah, blah, blah. We're going to be there Saturday. We'll be out picking up trash in the parking lot at 10 o'clock. And if you want to meet us, come down and meet us. And we did that on every property. So we'd arrive at 10 o'clock with our big bags and our gloves, and we'd pick up trash. And, humanizes us. And so that happened. Josh left on the other property. And then after Josh left, a mutiny happened. So all these tenants come out of their apartments. They come down and tell me how bad the property is, what a crappy area it is, how crappy their apartments is. And I said, hey, we inspected every single one of your apartments and you guys didn't tell us. We asked you, is there anything we should know about the property? You guys said nothing. So for you to come down today and tell me this in a mutiny, what you're basically telling me is you're not going to pay your rent, right? And they go, yeah. So I went out to my car, and before I left that property, I wrote 5 3-day notices and posted 5 doors so they knew who the boss was in town. And by the way, only one of them left. The rest of them paid their rent. And I wouldn't have done that earlier if this was a more wise landlord by that time. But when you let them know that you're not going to take any crap from them, you're going to fix the property, you're going to fix the issues. But if you're not going to pay your rent, we're not friends now. Bye-bye. That got it under control lots faster than it was on earlier properties because I just wasn't about to take the crap. Okay, that's it.
Well, no, that's another one of our lessons, Mom. I mean, one of the things that we've said for a long, long time is we don't have properties with deferred maintenance. Whenever you tell us there's an issue, we're going to have somebody out there same day or next day and fix that issue. When we turn over properties, we don't, go through with our hands over our eyes. We look, what's wrong with this thing? We're analyzing, we're handling all the deferred maintenance issues between tenancies because it's a lot easier to get a maintenance man or maintenance woman in when the property's vacant versus somebody in there. So we don't do deferred maintenance and we don't allow it and we don't beg for rent. And that's, that's been part of your pitch for a long time when you groove people in. Like, look, managers have different philosophies. Here's ours. And we're going to provide you a nice place to live. You need something breaks. We're going to be there instantly. You're going to love us. And we don't beg for rent. That's it. And if you don't have, I would call it a management philosophy around that, like here's a tragic mistake that landlords make. Okay, I know there's an issue that would cost me $5,000. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to discount the rent $50 a month. Right? I mean, that's just a toilet bowl with, you're just flushing your investment down.
That's why attorneys are in business.
That's why attorneys are in business. That's exactly right. Because now your tenants have cause to come after you and to actually have a lawsuit against you and you're done. So,
or when you want to collect the rent, you have to go to court. They'll say the landlord didn't handle this, the landlord didn't handle that. So it just doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. So the lesson that I got out of the story you just told, Mom, is have a landlord philosophy, fix the issues, let your tenants know right up front. In fact, Mom, you have a speech that you would give tenants when you would walk them through the lease. And
I still do it.
Yeah.
I'm teaching Darren my pitch.
Share that.
I've reduced it down. because of COVID.
Will you share that with everybody? Just give them the Cliff Notes.
Well, I just go through the lease. I go through, now I send them the lease ahead. I should have been doing that for years. I send them the lease ahead so they've had time to read it and they know what they want to ask me. And then I just tell them what's important to me. Here's what the rent is. I walk through it. Here's the rent. Here's your add-ons. Here's your deposit. Why do we keep half? Here's what I'm going to make you do before you get your deposit back. Here's what we're going to do. I walk them through everything in the lease. And then I had some add-on pages. Like if you're burning candles, you're going to have petrocarbons and soot all over the walls and windows. You can't wash it. You have to repaint it. That's your cost. You burnt the candle. And it's very expensive to repaint the whole apartment. So use Scentsies, little things like that. I let them know that if you put tampons and wet wipes down the toilet, it's going to back up. You're going to pay for that. So when the plumber pulls the line out, he's going to tell me what he found. So don't put wet wipes and tampons down the toilet. And by the way, once you give these little lectures at the very front end, nicely, you're friendly, you beat them. It never happens. The problems that I pitch that don't happen during the tenancy, almost never.
Yeah, it's like if you establish a ethics presence or a discipline up front, that this is the terms of our relationship, you will cut down on your problems with tenants by 50, 60, 70%. So have a landlord philosophy. That's, let's leave that there. But adopt a philosophy and stick to it all the time.
Gotta stick to it because they've all been raised by parents that say, well, I know I said you had to be in bed by 8, but I'll let you go. So they've all been raised by parents that, I was a hippie parent, so I can say this. But Hillary would remind me when I want to slide a little bit, she'd go, what would you tell your clients? And I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
So I got away with nothing.
Yeah. Well, I think these are some great lessons. And in the time we have left, Mom, I want to kind of shift this over to the financial upside.
Yeah.
And, the value of the property to me and to Mom and to my wife, Hillary, really doesn't matter unless we wanted to borrow against the property, because we don't ever plan to sell it. These are legacy assets for us. We've put 20 years of work into them. And our benefit is that we get to reap the cash flow from now until we die as the custodians of this property. And we hope that our kids, my kids, Hillary's kids, are deserving of inheriting these properties, and hopefully they can live off those cash flows forever. And
there's lots of dog rescues if they misbehave.
Yes, that's it. and hopefully they can pass them down to their kids. So what I'll be teaching my kids over the next 10 years, hopefully a lot longer than that, but what I'll be teaching them is the power of these properties is the cash flow. And that's what I really want to focus on for the rest of this interview, because what I didn't anticipate is that our rents would grow the way they have over the last 20 years. When we bought this building, we were bringing in between 280. I actually think there was some that were rented for 250, up to 315 in rent. So we would average somewhere around $300 a month in rent. That means that we were generating $28,800 in gross rents a year. Now, what I'm explaining to you right now is tied into inflation-induced debt destruction. So make sure you get this. When we bought the property, total gross rents, $300 a month average times 8, $2,400 a month means we were bringing in $28,800 per year in gross rents. Fast forward 20 years later to 2021, Mom just said she just rented her most recent unit for the highest rents ever, essentially $1,490. Well, we're bringing in $123,840 in gross rents. Now, keep in mind, there's still management expenses. Say again, Mom.
On one eightplex.
On one eightplex, yeah, correct. On this property, Wall Street. Now, keep in mind, there's still management costs, there's still overhead, there's still capital improvements that we pay for. But if you think about that number, essentially from 30,000 to 123,000, that is a multiple of rent increase over 20 years that I'm honestly just shocked. And if we look at what's going on with rents right now, rents in Utah and across many areas of the country are going up at the fastest pace ever in the history. I mean, we've never seen rents go up this fast, have we?
No, that's crazy.
Yeah. And so if you think again back to this concept around inflation-induced debt destruction, we borrowed $315,000 when we bought that property. We probably put in over the years, I don't know, Mom, you think 150, 200,000?
Yeah.
Ballpark?
Yeah, because we've replaced all the kitchens and bathrooms
Windows and yeah.
Yeah, we did all new windows, everything.
Yep. So let's say we're into it, 500,000 over the years. Although keep in mind, a lot of that money between the purchase price and the money we put in for renovations, a lot of that came out of cash flow, right? So it wasn't
all of it did, because if I could renovate out of cash flow, you wouldn't bug me. But if I had to hunt my partner down for a contribution, that was painful. So I was careful to renovate out of cash flow.
Yeah. So really, I think, even that renovation, we probably shouldn't even put into the equation. Let's just talk about the initial loan of $315,000 that in the moment felt monstrous.
Oh,
it felt onerous, $315,000 at an 8.5% interest rate. But if you fast forward 20 years, now the property brings in $123,840. It brings in 45% of the purchase price of the property per year.
Wow.
That's inflation-induced debt destruction, because the rents go up. My income has gone up. Our income on our portfolio has gone up. The value of money is less because of inflation, but the cost of the credit is the same because we borrowed $315,000. Now, actually, the cost of the credit's less because we've refinanced twice. So that's the power of owning properties a very long time, is you get this compound interest effect on your rents, right? Because year one, rents are at 300. Year two, you're raising them to 315. So if rents raise 5% per year, which it's probably been more than that over the last 20 years, but let's just say it's 5%. It's 5% on 300 the first year, 5% on 315, 5% on 350, 5% on 375, right? It's a compounding of interest on the rental amount. So the rents are going up exponentially, right? Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. That's what's happening to your rents. The cost of your debt stays the same, and the amount of the debt goes down. Now, there's one other thing that I'll say, Mom, and then I'm gonna turn it over to you to kind of close out here. All right. So the other thing that I think that I was going to mention is that over that period of time, we also got to depreciate the property.
That's what I was going to say.
What does that mean? Well, what happens is the IRS tax code says you can take the value of that property and you can minus off the land. And then what you can do is you can depreciate the different types of property. So the roof might be 20-year property, the refrigerator might be 5-year property, and you can depreciate those individual assets. This is called a cost segregation study. And you can take those depreciated loss, meaning that if a fridge is, cost you $1,000, but it's only worth it's only going to last for 5 years, then each year it's worth 20% less, and you can depreciate that against your income. So it was creating more income in terms of having a lower tax rate for me as an investor. I had the appreciation of the rents, not even talking about the price. I had the amortization of the loan, and the phantom winner, the phantom upside for the investor is inflation-induced debt destruction. And nobody thinks about that, but the actual value of the debt goes down because you have increased rents and you have inflation over long periods of time. Mom, did I describe that in a way that is understandable?
Well, let me just say why that's important. The reason Josh puts value on the rent increases, the paying down of the debt, the depreciation. Do you notice that Josh didn't talk about the increased value of the property? Do you know why he didn't talk about the increased value of the property? Because we don't plan to sell. It's nice to know, it's fun to know that you have X amount of value in your property, but we don't plan to sell. These are legacies we plan to pass on. So we don't, Josh didn't even discuss, and everybody who buys property discusses how much will it be worth in 10 years? How much, they don't talk about the rent raises. They don't think about that. They just want to know, how soon can I sell it and buy my boat? And we don't think like that. If you can put yourself down, even a 1/8plex, even a 4plex, think of that for your even if half of these dollar figures for your retirement. If you can say, for 20 years, I'm going to manage this darn thing and play the game for 20 years, your retirement is done, and you got a lot of leftover for your heirs. So we don't really think much about, Josh told me last year some figure that we had, what the figures were of our assets, and I was shocked, because I don't think about it, because I don't plan on spending it in my lifetime. But everybody who buys thinks of, how much will it be worth? How soon can I sell it? When can I get my boat? And that's why it's so hard to find partners, because they want to cut and run in the 10-year mark and go buy their boat. If you can just put yourself to it for 20 years, that's what we've done. We now have an enormous estate, and we don't care, because we just love the game. We're keeping at it. We're still buying. We bought 2 properties already this year, right?
Yeah. And the cash flow, I'll tell you, the first 10 years of owning any property is a struggle, and there's cash injections, and it's a lot of work. From there on forward, the gains get exponential and they get outsized. But the other thing that we didn't really touch on, there's actually 2 things I want to touch on. The other thing we didn't touch on is, when you buy a piece of real estate, one of the things that's so powerful about real estate is that you get the upside appreciation on the entire value of the asset.
Right.
And when you buy a stock, you get the upside and the appreciation on the amount of capital that you contribute, the amount of dollars that you put into that investment. And it's really important that people bifurcate those and think through those separately. So let's take the scenario of someone buying a home. Mom, this is their first home, and maybe they're going to turn it into a rental property and buy another home. They have a $300,000 purchase price they're going to pay for that home, and they're going to put down 10%. So they're going to put down $30,000. And in Utah last year, residential real estate went up 23.4%. 23.4% is how much housing has gone up over the last 12 months. So when you own real estate, it wasn't your $30,000 or down payment that went up to 23.4%. It was the entire value of the property. So the 23.4% of your 300,000, I'm just throwing in my nifty calculator here real quick, means that you had appreciation of $70,200. $70,200 on a $300,000 house, but you only put in $300,000. So that means that you had an upside return of 234% in 1 year. Does that make sense? Because
absolutely.
Yeah, because your capital of 30,000 more than doubled in 1 year. And so that's leverage, right, Mom? That's the leverage of using debt. And when you use debt, we hope that you do it with positive cash flow. That's one of the, the early lessons that we learned is we could survive the Great Recession when everybody around us was having short sales and foreclosures and going to bankruptcy. We had financial turmoil too, but by the grace of God, by the time the recession came, the vast majority of our properties were positive cash flow. Not a lot, but they were enough positive cash flow where we didn't have to inject more capital into them, where the people around us that didn't have positive cash flow threw up their arms and said, we're out of here.
Yeah.
So there's really 2 lessons there. Lesson number 1 is one of the advantages of real estate is you get great leverage and you get appreciation on the whole leverage. The other lesson there is, don't take out more leverage than you can cash flow if you had to rent that property out. Mom, let's talk just a little bit about borrowing against properties, because we talked about appreciation and we don't really think about that. However, this year we borrowed against those appreciated values on three of our apartment buildings, Delmar, Clinton, and Parkway. We borrowed against those high values. We pulled out cash at a very low interest rate.
We paid off higher interest notes and reduced the interest, so our payments went down.
Yep.
Don't forget that part.
Yep. So we pulled out, we pulled out about $1.5 million in cash at interest rates somewhere around 3%, right around there, right? Maybe somewhere 2.7, 2.8. And then we used that money and we paid off all the loans on our houses. And those house loans were, 5.5 or 6%. So we borrowed against the asset. Now, this is the lesson I wanted to get to, is that when you borrow against an asset and you extract equity, that's a non-taxable event. So if we would have sold those properties, we would have had massive capital gains, and it would have been a real nightmare on our tax liability.
You'd have a loan on that boat.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the loan to pay the IRS off.
Right.
And so if we borrow against that asset and we use that money to obtain another asset, or we use that money to pay off other debts on other properties, that's completely tax-free. There's no liability.
It's not income. By the way, we don't practice tax law. We're not CPAs, but we didn't have to pay on it because it's capital. It is not income until you sell it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So I won't sell it. And when I die, should I go there?
Yeah, this is the bow that I want to put on the call.
Okay, so when I die, I always tell Josh, sell when I die. If you're going to sell when I die, because Josh will get what is called a stepped up basis. Here's what that means, because I just went through it with my mom's estate. So mom and dad bought a ton of land down in southern Utah. They probably paid, I think they paid $13,000 an acre for it. They had something like 550 acres. When they died, and dad developed part of them into acre plus ranchettes lots. When they died, we had a bunch of lots left over. We sold them. So mom bought them for $13,000 an acre. We sold them. They were acre plus, but we sold them, one for $125,000 and most of them for $90,000 to $95,000. But when mom died, if she would have sold those lots, she would have paid taxes on all the gain.
That's right.
But when mom died, the basis, the value stepped up to the day. We had it appraised the day she died, and we did not have to pay income tax or capital gain tax on any of that gain, because when you die, it steps up. Now, the government might change those laws in the future, but for now, if the laws stay as they are, when I die, Josh will get a stepped up value, so that half of the property that I own with Josh, my half of the property will be raised up to today's value. He will not have to pay capital gains taxes on all the gain that I got during my lifetime. So he only has to pay for his half. And then he might say, hey, I'm going to just give this to my kids and I won't have to pay. So by stewarding land and property and providing housing and improving neighborhoods, you get the government rewards you, and this is our reward.
Yeah, and I just want to clear the word basis, because that can be okay, confusing. So basis is just relative to your tax liability. And if we bought the property at $315,000, let's go back to Wall Street. Okay. And let's just, to make it simple for a minute, let's just pretend that mom owned that property and I didn't own it, because it'll make the illustration a little easier. So she bought it for $315,000. And then she depreciated, which means she took a phantom write-off against her income. And let's say she depreciated it down to 100,000, because there's a land value there that you cannot depreciate. So let's say she took $215,000 of tax deduction. Now the basis that she's going to owe taxes on is everything above 100,000, because she bought it at 315. She took a tax write-off called depreciation of 215,000. Now her basis is 100,000. So if she decided to sell before she passed away, she would need to pay taxes, capital gains, on everything between what her basis is That's basically where the IRS says that's what you're into the property, essentially. And she would need to pay taxes on everything between there and where she sells the property. Now it gets
I'm glad you
slightly more,
explained that.
yeah, it gets slightly more complicated than that, because if she's done capital improvements, we talked about putting $200,000 into the property, then that actually raises the basis. But I'm just trying to keep it simplistic.
Yeah.
So if the basis is now 100,000, that's the IRS's benchmark. And they're saying everything you sell it over that basis, whatever the basis is determined to be, which is going to be done by your CPA. It better be. Don't figure that out on your own. That's what the IRS is going to charge capital gains on. What mom is saying is, when you pass on and your kids inherit that money, their basis isn't the same as your basis. Right. Your basis is 100,000, but the kids or whoever inherits that property, their basis is fair market value of what that property is the day that the person passed away. So in our illustration today, and mom, don't die today, because we got a lot more fun to have.
I got a lot more fun to have too.
Yeah. But if today was the day that mom made her maker, the property's worth 2 million, and I inherited that property, my basis isn't 100,000. My basis is 2 million. So if I sell it in a year, which I never would, but if I did in a year and I sold it for 2.2 million, my tax liability, my capital gains is only the difference between what the value of the property was the day mom died and the value that I sold the property. In essence, mom has taken the tax deduction while she lived in the property, the owner did, so that saved her taxes. And then the kids get to inherit and have the higher basis. So essentially you pass down generationally without paying taxes on that property.
Clean slate.
Clean slate, baby. Yep, that's right. And I think, we'll just end, mom. And I think we've covered some really informative stuff. I really appreciate you coming down or coming on the show with me. But I want to talk a little bit about this idea that you and I have talked about passing on life's energy. And if you don't mind, and I know we're over on time, but would you tell like the abridged story of Grandpa Harker passing on his life's energy as this is how we talk. This is how mom and I talk. Passing on his life's energy, and then how grandma and grandpa passed on their life's energy, and now how one day you're going to pass on your life's energy. Like walk us through that, because this gets into legacy, and I think it's a great way to end.
It is a great thing. Okay, so both my grandpas were farmers. My mom's dad owned a ton of acreage in Taylorsville, and my grandfather died when my dad was 11, but my great grandfather owned land in West Valley. So, which my dad bought at fair market value. He didn't get any special deals. But my other grandpa, my mom's dad, that owned all the property in Taylorsville, sold a bunch of it. Some of it was condemned to put the freeway through, the I-215 freeway through, and part of it was bought by American Express over there, and their great big property. So my grandpa got a bunch of money, and he gave my mom and my uncle each $100,000, early inheritance, basically. And my mom took that money and bought a great big piece of property in Benyon. And my dad and mom were landscapers. And for 10 years, they enjoyed the appreciation. It was just raw land. So they enjoyed the appreciation of the value of that property. And they took topsoil off of it because it was hilly. They took topsoil out and had free topsoil in their landscaping business for 10 years in all their big commercial landscaping jobs. And then they sold it and invested in other real estate. So my mom started in the real estate investment. My dad was buying Corvettes. So my mom would invest the money as fast as she could. So there was no money left over for Corvettes and boats. And my dad said he would have been a poor man without my mom. So
that's true for most of us, just so you know, mom.
I know. That's true. So, but that life energy was passed to my mom and my uncle, and they were able to invest during their lifetimes, and they got a boost. Now I'm getting my inheritance late in my lifetime, but it's a boost. It's a boost for me. I have 2 siblings that predeceased my parents. It's a boost for their kids, my parents' grandkids. It's a boost for my brother. Everybody got a boost because of the way that my parents handled money and worked hard during their lifetimes. So it's leverage. It's leverage in my life. It's leverage in other people's life. I think in real estate, one of the best leverages, Josh talked about all the money leverages, one of the best leverages there is time.
Yes.
If you can just hold property for a good period of time, you'll come to realize the value of that property, and it becomes more than you thought it was going to be, because you get a different pitch when you're buying it, because you're looking at the day you're going to sell. So you get the pitch of what it will be worth, what's the write-off. But when you have it for a long period of time, you realize how absolutely valuable land is. And the government made the taxes that way so that people would hold on to it and shepherd it and take care of it over time.
Yeah, so, my business and life coach, Tim Brahim, he says that you should analyze your meditation practice every 10 years. And in between the 10 years, you should just sit your butt down and meditate. And I think that's the same with real estate. You should analyze your real estate holdings every 10 years, but between that, you should just fill it, make it nicer, and raise the rents and ignore everything else. I want to go back to this legacy thing. So, we're all going to meet that day where we're sitting on the front porch, we're in the backyard, and we're in our rocking chair, and we know that the end is near. And at that moment, I want to be able to look back, and I want to be able to look over my life, and I want to be proud. And I want to be able to have a transference of life energy. And the reason that I love real estate and I'm such a, 90% of my net worth is in real estate, is because I feel like that is a store of my life's energy that I get to reap the rewards in terms of cash flow until I die. And then I get to transfer all of that work and all of that sacrifice and all of that knowledge and energy it took to put that real estate portfolio together. That's my life energy that I get to then pass on to my kids. And now we've seen it, 3 generations in a row. And, there's not a meal or a get together that we don't think back about grandma and grandpa and tell their story of how they struggled to build their real estate holdings. And they went to the cheapest restaurants and stayed in the cheapest hotels so that they could keep as much of that life energy to pass on to their kids. And I want to be thought in the same way. And I think it's just a beautiful and compelling story to be able to pass on that life energy in that way.
It's kind of a little tiny bit of immortality.
That's a great way to say it. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mom, I think we covered a lot of ground. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I really appreciate you coming on and telling all the stories.
In 10 years.
What's that?
Let's do this in another 10 years.
Yeah, we'll do it at 30 years. Man, can you imagine what the rents will be in 2031?
Well, not only that, but we're starting to transition our holdings into a little different market. And I think the next one we do in 10 years, maybe we should even do it in 5 years, will be quite a bit different than our first 20 years of growth.
Yeah, I think that's true. Well, thanks, Mom. Thanks for being a great partner for all these years. Thanks for being a great mom. And thank you for coming on the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast.
Thank you for being my great partner all these years. We've had a ton of fun.
Amen.
Thanks for listening to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcast and Spotify to be notified of all future episodes, and follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. If you'd like to learn more about Neo Home Loans and how we empower homebuyers with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom, visit neohomeloans.com.